Welcome back to Sustainability Matters. I'm Tria Case. As our city strives to meet ambitious sustainability targets, the role of renewable energy sources has never been more critical. Today, we'll dive into the world of hydropower, an essential piece of the puzzle in our journey towards a greener, more sustainable future. In fact, because our power is provided by the New York Power Authority, CUNY's electricity partly comes from hydropower, supporting our commitment to renewable energy and sustainability. I'm thrilled to be joined by an esteemed panel of guests who bring unique perspectives and expertise to discuss how hydropower not only helps us reduce our carbon footprint, but also enhances the reliability and flexibility of our energy grid. Before we talk with our guests, let's first turn to Andrew Falzone for a broader perspective on the topic.
To the average city slicker like you and I, the idea of water and electricity may seem like a dangerous combination, but under the right conditions, water and electricity can be the perfect pairing, and have been for centuries. Water wheels were used long before we discovered electricity, dating back to 4000 BCE in Greece. They were used to convert the kinetic energy of flowing water to mechanical energy, likely first operating mills for grinding grain and crop irrigation. Operating on some of the same basic principles from 6,000 years ago, today's modern hydroelectric power plants supply 1/6 of the world's electricity. That's almost 4,500 terawatt hours as of 2020, which is more than all the other renewable resources combined and also more than nuclear power. But how exactly do you make electricity from water?
A hydroelectric dam is essentially a massive gate which redirects a river's natural flow through a large pipe called a penstock. Rushing water flows through the penstock and turns the blades of a turbine, which is attached to a generator in an adjacent power station. The turning of the blades spins coils of wire inside a magnetic field, producing a steady supply of electricity.
And perhaps most important, that electricity supply is created while generating no or negligible greenhouse gases. Here in New York State, the New York Power Authority is the state's public utility company and already has 3 large-scale hydroelectric power plants. Additionally, another 225 hydro-producing dams are either locally or privately operated across the state. Today, New York State meets approximately 20% of its total power needs with hydropower. However, the Empire State has set ambitious goals for renewable energy that include generating 70% of its electricity from renewables by 2030 and 100% of its electricity from zero-emission sources by 2040. As of 2021, less than a third of New York's electricity came from solar, wind, and hydropower. The Champlain Hudson Power Express is one of many clean energy projects ongoing in the state to help meet those goals. The project is 16 years in the making and scheduled to begin service in the spring of 2026. The ambitious project involves connecting Canadian hydropower dams in Quebec to power plants in Astoria, Queens, with 339 miles of mostly underground or underwater cable. Known as CHIPPY, the project will cost an estimated $6 billion and help the city rid itself of so-called peaker plants, which come on during times of peak demand. Located disproportionately in low-income communities, peaker plants are some of the worst emitters of air pollution and may be forced offline in 2025 due to tightening emissions guidelines. According to Chippy's developer, it's expected to create $7.3 billion worth of new salaries during the first 25 years of operation, with the majority of those jobs located in New York City. The project has not been without major obstacles, including getting approvals from the municipalities and local indigenous communities through which the 339-mile cable will run. Yet one major upside to the cable is that no new dams need to be built, which means no new emissions that would result from the construction and pouring of concrete. When it's powered on in the middle of 2026, Chippy will deliver up to 10.4 terawatt hours of clean power to New York City annually, fulfilling approximately 20% of the city's total energy needs. That will help decrease CO2 emissions by almost 4 million metric tons per year, the equivalent of removing 44% of passenger vehicles from city streets. And with the recent announcement that 3 of New York State's offshore wind projects have been canceled due to cost increases, the city and state will need every ounce of clean energy to meet their ambitious goals. I'm Andrew Falzone for Sustainability Matters on CUNY TV.
To discuss these issues, we have with us Christopher Fry from the New York Power Authority. He's a key figure in energy policy and strategy dedicated to advancing sustainable energy solutions in New York State. We have Charlie Salzer from the Mayor's Office of Climate and Environmental Justice, who will discuss the importance of hydropower in meeting the city's sustainability goals and its economic impacts. And from Hydro-Québec, we're joined by Peter Rose, who will share how cross-border partnerships and sustainable practices are crucial in delivering hydropower to New York City. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So, Charlie, let's start with why is hydropower so important? We hear a lot about solar and wind. How does hydropower factor into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also helpful to start by taking a step back and looking at New York State and its electricity makeup. So upstate New York roughly gets 90% of its electricity through renewable sources. In downstate New York City, we roughly get 10% renewable energy. We also have statewide targets to decarbonize the electrical grid. As mentioned in the preamble, we're aiming towards 100% zero emissions grid by 2040. At the local level, we have Local Law 97, which sets extremely ambitious greenhouse gas reduction targets for both the private sector and the public sector, or city government operations. To achieve those Local Law 97 targets, the city government is taking a multifaceted approach to try and decarbonize. 4 main key components of that are we have to make our operations as efficient as possible, our buildings as efficient as possible. Number 2, we have to implement on-site solar and battery storage where feasible. That is a critical component of the strategy. We have to take all of our fossil fuel-fired systems and buildings and electrify them. Lastly, we have to make investments in large-scale renewable energy. And that's exactly what the city's doing. City government has made essentially a down payment for this hydropower coming from Canada, the Champlain Hudson Power Express project. Essentially, city government operations electrical load will be emissions-free, which highly incentivizes electrifying the fleet and also building systems. So with all these things combined, it's amazing to see hydropower coming through Chippy to be able to electrify our building systems, electrify our fleet, to turn off these dirty peaker plants, which is a huge public health element in New York City in disadvantaged communities. And we're just so excited to see this project come to fruition.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Chris, how much hydropower is produced in New York today?
Well, fortunately, New York has quite a bit of hydropower to support us in the transition to renewable energy. And I cannot overstate the importance of hydropower in supporting that transition, because hydropower complements intermittent renewables like wind and solar. Hydro not only provides clean and reliable 24/7 baseload generation, hydropower is what's called dispatchable, which means that it can increase or decrease its output to meet the demand for electricity and help balance out fluctuations in other generation sources like wind and solar. And so it's really crucial to enabling the whole transition to clean energy. As I said, fortunately, New York has quite a bit of hydropower to support us with that transition. NYPA's St. Lawrence facility alone, which was mentioned in the intro video, produces 800,000 kilowatts of electricity. Now, to put that in perspective, that's enough to power a city the size of Washington, D.C. And our Niagara Power project produces over 2.6 million kilowatts, more than 3 times as much. So, in addition to the 2 large hydroelectric projects, NYPA also owns and operates 15 other generating facilities across the state. And so in total, we generate about 25% of New York's electricity, 80% of which is clean, renewable hydropower. And so we're starting from a great baseline. And New York has bold renewable energy goals, and we're going to need to develop a lot more wind and solar, but it's also crucial that we preserve and enhance our existing hydropower.
And why do we need to bring more hydropower in from Canada? What drives that?
Well, New York has largely developed our existing hydropower potential of the waterways and the dams and whatnot in New York. They've already been largely developed. So in addition to wind and solar, we need dispatchable energy resources to keep our grid reliable while we make this transition to a clean energy future.
So bringing hydropower from Quebec is a long way to go, Peter.
340 miles.
So how does that happen? Talk to us a little bit about what this process is looking like and what we can expect.
Of course. We're very proud, again, to be part of this decarbonization effort with NYPA, with the city. Crucial as we're trying to fight climate change, which is an existential threat. So why are we doing this at a very baseline? As we know that fossil generation produces the greenhouse gases that are just accelerating climate change, and therefore having all these impacts locally. You know, Charlie can talk about it much more eloquently than I can, but rising sea levels, we have warmer summers, and on and on. So we really need to avail ourselves of every tool that we have in the belt. And given proximity, Quebec is straight north of New York, been trading with New York for a long time. Power comes to the northern part of the state. What's different is now through transmission, and probably we'll get into this in the conversation, the key to unlocking the congestion that we were talking about. NYPA has tremendous facilities. Quebec has 37,000 megawatts of installed capacity of hydro. It's enormous. And Quebec is 2.5 times the size of Texas for our US watchers here, and 8 million people. So you have 25% of Canada's water is located in Quebec, an abundant source available. For it to get down and help decarbonize New York City, we had to figure out how to solve the transmission equation. And that's been about 15, 16 years in the making, right? It's an underground buried line, 340 miles through the entire state, 60% underwater, 40% under rights of way. So it's never been tried before. And through our great partners in the state, in the city, and the federal government, we've unlocked that. And we're currently under construction, and we'll be flowing the first large renewable power into New York City by 2026.
So you talked a little bit about the power lines and the infrastructure that is required to bring that hydropower down to New York City. I guess, Chris and Peter, like maybe this is to both of you, how do we make sure that the benefits that hydropower is providing to us maybe outweigh the environmental impacts that it might have? And also, just to sort of maybe condense the conversation even more, I'm thinking a little bit about climate change and either droughts or more water, less water that may be coming our way. How do we manage that?
The unique thing about electricity is that it's not easily stored. It needs to be basically generated and transmitted to the end consumer pretty much in real time. And so as we think about decarbonizing, there can be no transition to clean energy without investment in transmission. And so one of NYPA's current focuses is on expanding transmission to ensure that our hydropower can serve load across the state and support that decarbonization statewide. A few examples of that include just last summer, we completed our Smart Path project, rebuilding almost 80 miles of transmission line in the North Country. And we're currently working on our Smart Path Connect project, extending that down further, an additional 100 miles of transmission lines down into central New York. And last year, we also completed our Central East Energy Connect project, which expanded transmission capacity between Oneida and Albany, which was previously one of the most congested areas in the state's transmission grid. And so through a comprehensive set of transmission upgrades, we're able to expand the transmission capacity and ensure that electricity is able to flow where it needs to, and so that our NYPA's hydropower can support that decarbonization effort statewide.
I could speak a little bit about the management, and you could also talk to Chris about the management of hydro assets. Think of this as your biggest battery in North America. You can hold water back in these for days, weeks, months, seasons, and you can use other sources, and we also have wind power in Quebec, and we've been practicing this. How do you balance the wind, which is by definition intermittent or variable, with this constantly available water that you use gravity, as you can see in these great images, to turn the turbines and the rotors and create. So it acts as a long-term battery system as well. Building this line, to your point, the Chippy line, went under a lot of rigorous scrutiny. I mean, we needed a presidential permit to get across the border. That was re-upped over 3 U.S. administrations, so seen as a priority for the cross-border relationship we have between Canada and the United States. It went under rigorous reviews under New York State's Article 7 process, reviewed by the Army Corps of Engineers since it goes in navigable waterways, hundreds and thousands of public meetings. So it's probably one of the most studied green energy infrastructure projects in New York's history. And so to get back to your original question, also about what happens with climate change. You know, we have hydrology or hydrolicity, as we call it in Quebec. These are variables. So all energy is variable, right? And so is hydropower. It depends on how much inflow you have, precipitation, melting from your other, snow sources. But the beauty of the system is that you're able to manage that system over years. And you target your production based on your committed energy sales. So what we do in Quebec is we have committed energy sales to Quebec, as we have committed energy sales over Champlain Hudson for 25 years. These are locked in blocks of energy. And then as we look forward into climate science, climate change is going to impact different parts of the country in different ways, or different parts of the continent in different ways. We're seeing international studies that are showing an increase of 6 to 8% of water inflows in Quebec going out to 2050. So one consequence of climate change in Quebec actually means more water.
Interesting. And you were talking, Chris, earlier about buildings and decarbonizing buildings, and that's going to make us more reliant on the grid and energy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. No, our electricity use is going to go up, and that is for sure. We're also going to be going into a transition of a summer peaking system where everyone's got their ACs on to a winter peaking system when everyone has their heat pumps on in their house or they're charging their electric vehicle. One thing I do want to just underscore from both Pete and Chris is the complexity of these transmission projects. I think they were underselling it. It is incredibly complicated to be doing transmission lines, especially through New York City. We've been fortunate enough to have a great partnership with the Chippy project team and the developers. We have subway lines, we have utility lines, we have electricity lines, you don't even know what's under the street sometimes. And it takes a whole lot of coordination to make sure that when we're doing the siting of these transmission lines in New York City area, that we're minimizing the impactors to everyday New Yorkers. And I think that that's something that we've really been trying to focus on and have built a great relationship with the developers on.
And one of the other components, of course, when we think about electricity is cost. How does this project and this process of sort of more reliance on hydropower impact the cost of power?
I'm not too embedded in the regulatory frameworks of energy prices, but I understand that it gets regulated at the state level, right? And I think New York City is always at the table to advocate for everyday New Yorkers. And we also have to recognize that we have over 400,000 folks in New York City that are energy burdened or pay 6% of their annual salary on energy costs. And we take that very, very seriously. And what we do is we advocate to the state to make sure that energy prices are staying as affordable as they possibly can and try and balance it, right? You have to balance it with, we have climate change as an immediate threat and we have to respond to that. But we also have to understand that folks are struggling to pay their utility bills. And so we have to find that fine balance between those two.
And to Charlie's point, again, thank you. I mean, it's been a tremendous partnership. This is, I think, a good example of public-private partnerships to address climate change. And yes, it is very complicated. New York City has lots of things under their streets. But to your question on price, was looked at the Public Service Commission. Mm-hmm. And it was studied in depth. And at a base level, there's more benefit than cost to this project, right? And at the end of the day, we're delivering 10.4 terawatt hours every year, all year, summer, winter, the whole year round into New York City. This is a large influx of energy. That puts downward pressure directly on wholesale electricity prices, right? What it does also provide is displacement of the fossil fuel prices, which are variable in their cost spike. They've spiked tremendously over the past couple of years. So that gives you predictability over 25 years at a set price. And not to mention all of, and you can pencil this out, but all the actual benefits of displacing the fossil on health, local air pollutions, if we're obviously displacing peaker use. When you pencil everything out, there is a much more upside and benefit to actually bringing in this amount of power to New York City.
And if I could just add to that a little bit, I think since the beginning of the electricity industry, we've had this tension between affordability and reliability. We need our electricity to be available 24/7, but that comes at a cost. And so we've always had this balance. And then in recent years, now there's this third priority of we also want it to be clean. And so that just makes it even more challenging. Now, I'm a visual person, so I tend to picture this as like a Venn diagram where you have affordable resources, clean resources, and reliable resources. And when you look at what different types of resources fit in the different parts of this Venn diagram, the only thing that I can think of that hits that bullseye in the dead center and ticks all three boxes is hydropower. Because wind power and solar have made tremendous cost advances, but they're intermittent. And so it may be clean and affordable, but it's not reliable. When you augment that with battery storage, now you're reliable, but now you're not affordable anymore. And so when you think through all the different resource types, really hydro has a unique ability to hit all three priorities.
And it helps to balance what you're talking about. So you're looking at this great complementary bouquet of energy sources for New York City. You have this baseline, foundational, clean energy 24/7. You have wind and solar. This is going to help offshore wind at the end of the day as well. You're going to reduce the amount of time that you have to curtail because you're going to be able to organize and plan and schedule deliveries into New York to maximize all of your resources. And so it's going to make it overall more efficient, effective, and more cost effective for New York City and for ratepayers.
One of the things we know is that hydropowers and wind power, they're coming into communities where they might not have been before. How are you working with those communities to support economic development? I know that there are some collaborations actually with CUNY campuses. It'd be great to sort of hear a little bit more about that.
Sure, I can jump off and then guys jump into it. So this project will create 1,400 construction jobs. So off the bat, you are going to be providing jobs through this project. On top of it, we have a fund that's also going to help for workforce development. As we're looking to transition to a clean economy, we have to expect that we're giving tools to everyday New Yorkers to be part of this. So we have a $40 million fund to support that. All of these funds are targeting disadvantaged communities, because as we look at this next iteration of our economy, our society, and energy, we have to make sure everybody's there at the table to participate from the very beginning. And so we're laser focused on this 340-mile line to provide these opportunities. We had one round of our Green Economy Fund, which is workforce development, that came out last year. We just opened it up 2 days ago or 3 days ago for the next round. This is $40 million that's going to be available for the next 20 years to, again, complement. There's lots of money sources out there. The government typically will fund trainings, right? We'll come in and cover operational costs that some of these organizations can't find funding for. Or we also cover some of the sources of funding that people need to actually get to the trainings. Wraparound services. Do they have a Metro card? Do they have babysitting for their kids? And the list goes on and on. So we're trying to be mindful of how we spend this money in the communities in consultation with these communities.
What are the kinds of jobs that you're seeing come out of this project?
Sure. I mean, every union shop you can think of, every trade, from the electrical engineers to the operators. I mean, it's interesting. We've got divers on this job. You've got dock workers. You have obviously the operators, the electrical folks. Every single building construction trade is on this project right now.
The New York City Economic Development Corporation just came out with their Green Economy Action Plan. One incredible stat from that I'll just cherry pick right now is the fact that they are projecting that over 400,000 green economy jobs will be in place in New York City by 2040, which is incredible. So that means that there is a lot happening in this space. In addition to Chippy, there's so much more, and we could not be more excited about that.
Incredible opportunity. So what do you see as the next step? What are the challenges that you're thinking about as you move this project forward and think about sort of the future of hydropower?
In terms of next steps, NYPA is focused obviously on expanding transmission to ensure that we can decarbonize statewide, but also on preserving and enhancing our existing hydropower. So in 2019, NYPA launched our Next Gen Niagara program, which is a $1.1 billion 15-year program to completely upgrade and digitize our Niagara Power project. Now, this is the first major upgrade since the facility was constructed more than 60 years ago, and the centerpiece of these upgrades is the overhaul of the control room and digitization of the entire plant. And this multi-year revitalization effort is really vital to ensuring that New York's largest single source of clean electricity and one of the largest hydro plants in the country can continue contributing to New York's renewable energy mix for decades to come.
Completing this project, again, we're on schedule for 2026. We have aggressive goals in Quebec to be fully decarbonized as an economy by 2050. What we see, and we're not the first to look at this, New England's looked at it, New York, there's been many studies, it's bidirectional inter-regional transmission. So we need to be building more highways to move these electrons north and south, two directions. From Quebec, it's traditionally been delivering down to the south. There's a world in which you get to full decarbonization in 2050 by optimizing all the wonderful resources in this region. And going back to your initial question, that actually will save a ton of money for ratepayers because you're optimizing your grid. So that we see that as the future as we go out to 2050 in a regional transmission.
It's exciting. We're all connected.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that, battery storage is one of those kind of unknowns. It's known but unknown, right? There's many challenges associated with it. Chris, you had mentioned the cost. It is extremely expensive, but we can't only just rely on hydropower, just to be clear, right? We need to have wind, we need to have solar, we need to have other forms of renewable energy, right? And we need to be able to utilize and store that energy. So I think that's definitely on the horizon, something that the city's for sure thinking about. But taking a step back is, this transition to a renewable energy future needs to be just. It needs to be distributed equitably across New York City. And we also need to make sure that we are striking that balance with affordability, reliability. So it all comes back to those key components.
You just celebrated Hydropower Week.
Yep.
So congratulations on just completing that. It's a great reminder that we are all connected, and also thinking about the various sources of renewable energy, and there isn't one solution here. We clearly have to be thinking about this holistically. So thank you all for what you're doing and for the work that you're bringing to New York City. And thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please keep the conversation going and follow us or send us a message on social media. You can also watch us from anywhere with our new CUNY TV app. And be sure to join us next month when we'll visit Governor's Island and showcase how it's becoming a beacon of sustainability.